I wrote a story to prove how mean God was, but boy, was I shocked. This is part 1 of The Rag Doll. The big day arrived, and with it much joy and much sadness. The doll that had been specifically ordered was about to be delivered. At the sound of the doorbell, the father raced from his place at the big picture window where he had watched them carefully remove the box that contained this long-awaited treasure. There was a gleam in his eye and a smile on his face that could brighten the darkest of days as he reached to take hold of Isabel. Isabel was a beautiful doll who had been handcrafted and sewn together with the greatest of care. She was a priceless, one-of-a-kind original, specifically ordered for his daughter. Isabel had long, silky brown hair, an almost pale yet delicate face, whose painted-on eyes sparkled when the light touched them. Her mouth curved upward in a smile that suggested she was laughing. Her little cheeks had the slightest shade of pink to suggest she had just been out in the cold. Her body was made of the softest, smoothest material, and each seam was sewn with the utmost care. Not a stitch was missing or out of place. The craftsman had even placed his trademark across her frame, a heart, so delicately and intricately woven that she would not be mistaken as the work of any other. Her clothes were made of the deepest, richest colors. Laces and ribbons wound around the length of her skirts. There was a row of buttons down her back and a beautiful satin bow attached to the belt around her waist. Her socks were of the finest embroidery and her shoes were black patent leather with real buckles. On her head she wore a hat, a dainty little hat, decorated with berries on the side. Yes, she was everything the father had ordered. He was pleased. There was another member of this house that was not as thrilled at the new arrival. A young girl, his daughter. She had been dreading this day for months and was hiding in her room when Isabel arrived. The last few months had been miserable for the girl. Every day her father would talk with her about this special present he was giving her. He had given her a book on how to care for it, wash it, and comb its hair. He showed her how to stand it up properly so she wouldn't fall over. He even showed her how to hold it. He wanted to teach her responsibility. All she wanted was to go outside and play with the boys. On her street, there were many children, but she was the only girl, and so she had grown up learning to be rough and tough, and she preferred living a life of mischief as opposed to playing indoors with dolls. She had asked her father for a football. What he gave her was this doll. The father took Isabel into the living room and gently laid her on the couch. He called for his daughter to come join him. Shuffling her feet along the floor, head held down, she slowly made her way into the room and lowered herself onto the chair across from the doll. The father once again told his little girl, "This doll is yours. She's a very special doll. There is no other doll like her. I had her made just for you. I am entrusting her into your care. I know you will love her and take good care of her, just like we have talked about." The daughter glanced up at the doll, saw her silly hat and 2 fancy clothes, and quickly looked away to stare at the TV as her father continued. He handed her a box, which contained Isabel's brush and extra outfit. There was a sweater, a pair of fuzzy pants, warm woolly socks, mittens, and a pair of boots. The father took a long look at his daughter, took a deep breath, and said, "Isabel is yours. I will remind you from time to time to take good care of her, but it is up to you to keep her value. A doll like this will be more valuable as the years go by." And with those last words, the father picked up Isabel and ever so gently handed her over to his daughter. She was now solely the responsibility of his young girl. The girl took Isabel into her room and placed her on the special shelf her father had made for her. She placed the box under her bed and then ran out the door, down the hall, and outside to play with her friends. It was her team's turn to have the ball in their most recent football game. As the door slammed behind her, the father looked down the hall and saw Isabel in her special stand with her sparkling eyes and slight smile, and the father smiled to himself. Isabel was going to be all right. After weeks of sitting on the shelf and collecting dust, the day came when Isabel was taken down. The young girl had gotten tired of this doll just staring at her with its shining eyes and happy smile. She grabbed it off the shelf and tossed it on the bed. She jumped up on the bed and proceeded to remove the boots, then socks, until finally Isabel was completely undressed. The young girl was fascinated momentarily with how well the doll was made. She even ran her finger carefully over the doll's heart, the trademark of her maker. The girl began to see the beauty in this doll and started to understand what her father had been trying to tell her. About this time, one of the girl's friends came over. He walked in to find her playing with her doll, and he laughed. Hearing this, she instinctively tossed the doll on the floor, proclaiming loudly that she didn't like dolls, and she ran outside with her friend to play. The father had been in the next room and heard the boy laugh and his daughter's comment. He also heard a crash, so he went to see what it was. What he found was Isabel, clothes removed and scattered on the floor, and her body slumped against the bottom drawer of her daughter's dresser. Should he bend down and pick her up? No, he had told his daughter that Isabel was her responsibility. He would stay true to his word and not intervene. He knew that the way she had landed would put strain on her seams, but he hoped his daughter would return soon and once again place Isabel where she belonged safely on the shelf. That night, as his daughter came home, he spoke very kindly to her but reminded her to take care of Isabel. She walked right past him, not hearing a word he said, and jumped into bed without another thought of her doll. It was 3 days before the young girl even thought of picking up Isabel, and when she did, it was not because she wanted to. It was because her father had reminded her to for the last few days, and she was tired of being nagged about it. When she lifted her off the ground, she noticed that there were cobwebs in Isabel's hair. She didn't feel like getting out the brush, so she just poured some water on her head and tried to smooth it out with her hands, and then tossed her up on the shelf in a haphazard way. The father had been standing in the doorway watching this, but said nothing else to her as his heart began to sink. What he had meant as a great gift and blessing for his daughter was being destroyed. One day, the young girl took the doll outside. When she returned that night alone, her father asked her where Isabel was. The girl made up some story of how her friend had a little sister and wanted his little sister to play with it. The father knew she wasn't telling the truth. He'd seen her give the doll to a child from down the street that had no sisters. He wondered if the doll would ever be returned, and if it was, what would she be like? Stay tuned for part 2.